host of Franchising Brand Stories.
Hi, I'm Deborah, the founder of The Reading Doctor.
And welcome to Franchising Brand Stories. This is a show where we get under the hat of some of the top brands in the UK and in the world. This is a live format. If you are watching it on June 27th, between about 5:15 and 6 o'clock, it's live. So you can comment and come in. We really encourage this to be something that is inclusive. And it'll be great to have your questions as we go along. Franchising Brand Stories is all about hearing the stories behind the brands. So it'll be great to have your questions as we go along. So the brand story we're going to hear today is The Reading Doctor with the lovely Deborah Salsbury. And before I hand things over to Deborah, I'm going to read something. Seems appropriate today, doesn't it?
Very apt.
That's it. Making waves across the nation. In this episode of Franchising Brand Stories, we have the pleasure of hosting a truly inspirational figure whose innovative work in literacy and education is making waves across the nation. She is an entrepreneur, an educator, and a passionate advocate for children's literacy. Please join me in welcoming Deborah Salsbury, the dynamic founder of The Reading Doctor franchise. Deborah has taken her profound understanding of reading education and transformed it into a revolutionary franchise that is helping children everywhere develop the critical skills they need to succeed. So what a fantastic thing to do. So firstly, Deborah, welcome to Franchising Brand Stories. It's fantastic to have you here today. And we'd like to begin with chapter 1, and it's a good place to start, isn't it? And again, it seems apt today.
Yeah.
Books. So tell us a little bit about what Reading Doctor is and where you're at now.
So The Reading Doctor is an intervention / tutoring business for children who struggle with learning to read. And they may or may not be dyslexic. We don't claim to be experts in dyslexia. However, many of the reading doctors do have extra qualifications in dyslexia. And also, we seem to attract lots of dyslexic pupils or those that go on to get a diagnosis. So we unlock their potential.
Fantastic. And where are you at as a franchise right now? How long have you been about, and how many franchisees have you got at the moment?
So the franchise started in 2019. So in May 2019. So 5 years old. But the company I started just over 12 years ago.
Fantastic.
So it took me 7 years to perfect the business model before I started thinking about franchising.
Great, yeah, fantastic. How many franchisees have you got right now?
All signed up, 34. 3 of them will be starting officially in September, leaving their teaching posts in July.
Oh, fantastic. Great. Well, look, thank you so much for that wonderful description. It really sort of helps set the scene. Before we get into things, I just want to introduce a few people who have joined us live today. As I say, this is all about you, and it's great to have you here as well. So first of all, it's the ever wise Simon Wise. It's great to have you here, Simon. I know Simon is sunning himself in Spain at the moment, so fantastic to have you here. We have Tim Morris here. Lovely to have you here, Tim. And he's put that it's good to be here and he loves the Reading Doctor story. Well, we are going to hear that story today. So I am looking forward to this. And another person who's looking forward to this is Natalia, guest on the show this week on Tuesday. And she's put really looking forward to this. And so are we all. So, and before we get into the sort of the main part of today's show, if you have just joined us today, this is Franchising Brand Stories, and today we're hearing the story behind the Reading Doctor with the lovely Deborah Salsbury. And this is now, we're getting into chapter 2, which is the main part of the story. And we're going to look back at where things began, which is a good place to start a book. But I'd also like to say at this point, if you've got a story to tell about your franchise journey, then scan the QR code, because we are all about telling great stories here and finding out what's under the hat. I'm loving my catchphrase now, you see. So without further ado, let's get into chapter 2. So Deborah, take us back now to the beginning. What sort of inspired you to begin your journey here, and where did it all begin?
Well, I think every time I've told the Reading Doctor story, I've started in a different place. But when I knew I was coming on here, I had a real sort of delve right back as to what my inspiration was. And it really goes back to my mum, because she is one of the most inspirational people I know. And she was failed by the education system. So she left school not being able to read and write very well. And that has had, a huge impact on her throughout her life. But she hasn't let it stop her. And she made sure that myself, my brother and my sister had a fantastic education as far as what was on offer. So she started by uprooting us from a quite deprived area, in Nottingham, which actually, even though we lived in quite a deprived area, she managed to make connections. And I've thought about the theme, and I think connections and having the right people around you, which does fit with franchising, is definitely something that she did. So we lived in a deprived area, but it happened to be right by the university and the medical centre. So some of our neighbours were university professors and medics, and that was quite inspirational, having those people around us. And then she moved us to a very lovely village where we went to a really lovely primary school where, if everyone could have an education like that, a state primary school with animals, peacocks called Elizabeth and Philip. We had peacock duty. We had...
Were the peacocks called Elizabeth and Philip?
Yes,
yes. Fantastic. I love that. Great peacock names, I would suggest.
Yes. Oh, somebody said Clifton by any chance. It was actually Dunkirk, Stephen. By the flyover, right by.
We obviously have a local in Stephen, yeah. Is that right?
I think so. So, my mum decided that she would like us to grow up in that environment. So somehow, probably her literacy levels were quite low. She didn't drive. It was, the 1970s. She managed to move us to this lovely village, and we just had a great, it was the best school for me. I didn't know I was dyslexic then, but literacy was taught by authors visiting the school. We had the Card Gumdrop visit our school. We had Helen Cresswell, who was a children's author. She visited and showed us her draft copies of her books, and we made things that go with her books, like the bongleweed. The hall was covered in bongleweed. She did my Aunt Polly, who lives by the sea, and she knitted a big scarf, and we all knitted a big scarf. So I'm just looking back and thinking what made me tick. Lizzie Dripping was another one of her stories, and we all made puppets. So even though I found learning to read really hard, I loved stories. My dad read stories to us most nights. My mum bought us all the audio books for us to listen to. So I accessed literacy. Somehow my mum managed to take us to the theatre quite a lot, from our 3-bed semi, and she was a cleaner and a childminder. So she absolutely prioritised education and made it fun and enjoyable, as well as finding out what the books were that were coming that the school had, and buying those and buying the flashcards and making sure we had the first computer that the school got. We got the Acorn Electron that was compatible, with the BBC computer. So everything she did to enable us to access the education, which that it failed her. The system had failed her, but she's got this spirit, and she's still got it today. She's got this spirit in her, and she's a leader. She's a leader because she moved us to this village, and then her brother followed, and two of her sisters followed. So yeah, she's quite a maverick person, and it's only just recently I've realized actually what a huge inspiration she's been. And I like to think of it as you know, the intervention that I've created, you know, we're the teachers that she should have had, that would have helped her. It's not my only driver, but it's only really in coming on here and really thinking back that I've realized what a major influence she was.
Lovely.
I was in the special needs group at secondary school, because as soon as I got out of that lovely creative environment and into a very formal state secondary school that didn't suit my learning style, it was really flagged up that I was struggling. So I was put in the special needs group behind the big orange Hessian curtain. So that's going to be the title of my book, if I get behind the orange curtain.
That's a great title for the book as well. Yes, the last book I read myself had orange in the title, actually.
Oh,
Satsuma. It was the Satsuma Complex by Bob Mortimer. His book.
Okay.
You know what? It's really interesting. I mean, I'm not a great reader myself, and what I find difficult is where the words on the page become moving images and a story in your mind.
Yeah.
And I've always struggled with it, if I'm honest. And my wife was incredibly impressed with me, because we've just gone on a holiday and I read a book in under 48 hours, and I normally read one a year.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So perhaps you should have a look into
Yeah. So I think it's really interesting and so fascinating, and you know, lovely to hear how your mum and dad's, you know, created that environment and that supportive environment for you. And you know, I remember my dad reading me stories, and you know, that's such an important thing to happen in a child.
Yeah. And the other inspiration was my dad, actually, because he is undiagnosed autistic, and he is quite maverick, quite an eccentric. And he had always had his own business, well, from when I was about 5. So I watched him grow a business, and it started with him literally getting some scraps of wood together and building this like shack out the back of our house. And he started his own printing business. So he printed business cards and raffle tickets, and then he moved to a bigger workshop that was a barn in the village. And I always helped him. And if anyone ever said, what do you want to do when you're older? I would always just say, I want to work for my dad. And it was really inspirational watching him grow something. But I also heard all those conversations about, you know, the house is on the line and all of those things. So I heard all those negatives of growing a business, but also how we all gathered together. And when it was raffle ticket season, we would all sit round the table and we'd all do the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 staple. I'm really good at like collating paper, and you know, so that was like the inspiration in a business sense. And also my uncle, my mum's brother, from the same deprived background, one of 10 children, he actually got into grammar school. From that deprived background, and had to get 2 buses to get to school, and started his own engineering business. And so I watched his business grow in the 80s from a tiny little business to an international business. And I remember even in the 80s, and I do have some people take the mickey out of me a bit because I really am into my merch. And I remember in the 80s, I'd go to his house, his office at lunchtime and get the mugs, the pens, the notebooks. So I've had inspirational people around me in terms of business as well.
That's fantastic. What a great story of a beginning and an inspiration. What a lovely story to hear. It's so important to sort of see where the seeds of these things are created. So you mentioned that the premise behind the franchise is an intervention. It's to help people young people who are struggling a little bit. How does the structure of the franchise work? You know, do you go into schools? Is it councils? How does the sort of setup work?
There's a bit of both, but there's a little bit to plug in between that, and that's just the little bit about me being a teacher for 19 years. So I was managed to scrape through university. That's where my dyslexia was highlighted, and then then I became a primary school teacher for 19 years. Absolutely loved it. Thought I'd do it till I retire. It was my dream. Amazingly scraped by 2 A-level, got 2 A-levels to scrape in through clearing to university, and then worked my socks off and got a really good degree. So then I was a teacher for 19 years, and during those 19 years, I loved it. I started to find it a bit restrictive, and I couldn't be as creative as I wanted to be. And then I got the opportunity to become reading recovery trained, which is just an incredible way of teaching reading that was created by Mary Clay in the 1980s in New Zealand. Actually, it might have even been before the 80s. I think it was the 80s. And it was a really expensive training that went for a whole year, and I was put forward for it. And I thought I knew how to teach children to read, but I didn't, not until I'd had this training. So that was fantastic. I could teach one-to-one. I could take the children who were really stuck, but we could only take from age 5.9 to 6.3 because their self-esteem is still intact, usually at that age. And they've had enough what you call quality first teaching that hasn't worked for them. So that's the optimum time to catch them. So that was great. It was all brilliant. It was going great. And then a new head teacher came in, a new government came in early intervention strict. Everything was going to be reactive rather than preventative. Totally predicted that. So the article that you shared, when you shared this live, what was it called? I did write it down because I knew I'd forget. From the Literacy Trust, Early Words Matter.
Yes.
Yeah. It's now saying, oh dear, we've got a bit of a crisis, we need to do something about it. Or maybe if we go in early, that's a good idea. So totally preempted that. And when this new head teacher said you're going to have to go back to being a class teacher, I was just like, no way, I am out of here. And we've got a mortgage to pay. My salary was paying the mortgage as well. So I'm going to start up as a tutor, and I'm going to hit the ground running. And, and I just left in the December, and by the January, I was registered by the December, I was registered on Companies House. I had children waiting to be tutored, and a local pupil referral unit wanted me to take it into there. So that's for children who've been excluded from mainstream education. And that's where it grew. And although I'd got this reading recovery training, the reading doctor offering is not just based on that. It's because that's so niche and just targeted at younger children. So we've created the reading doctor intervention is for any child with a reading age below 12, and we have had pupils up to 20, and we have been asked a lot about teaching adults, but we just don't have the capacity for that because we're all really, really busy. So that's what it is. It's only so people buy into this franchise. They need to be qualified teachers.
Okay.
And ideally have some experience of working with children with SEN. But if you've been a teacher, you've worked with SEN children. We have lots of deputy heads who come on board as franchisees. special educational needs coordinators, like I said before, people with qualifications in dyslexia. So it's attracting really, really high quality. I know I could compromise on that, and I could take different people with, some experience, teaching assistants. There's some great teaching assistants out there, but I've made it my kind of own criteria, which is the beauty of being a franchisor. You can, decide, can't you?
Yes, absolutely, and it's really good. It's a question we do normally ask, which you very conveniently already answered, which is fantastic. But that's what type of people are you looking for? And you've answered that really succinctly by saying you're looking for qualified teachers, experience with working with children, particularly SEN. And that's really good, because then people who are watching this now or in the future can understand exactly the type of person that you're looking to work with. We've got a couple of good questions that have come in, so we're going to take a little pause and pop onto these questions. I'm going to take one here from Simon. And Simon's put, what does a typical day in the life of a franchisee look like? That's a great question. I think sometimes, especially, we spoke a little bit about when you're reading, you turn words into a picture and a story in your mind. Well, this question's fantastic, because when somebody's thinking, what would my life look like? And what would a day look like? What does a day in the life of a franchisee look like?
Okay, I'm sure everybody starts this answer with, there's no typical day, but I'll create a typical day, because the beauty of the Reading Doctor is you make your day how you want it to match your lifestyle. And so if you're a Reading Doctor, you are a passionate educator who has left the classroom, not because you don't like teaching anymore, the opposite, usually because you're so passionate that you want to make a difference. So you'll wake up in the morning at, I don't know, 8 o'clock, maybe take your own children to school, come back, maybe go on to our shared platform where we share ideas and celebrate each other. We have Workplace where we all communicate together. You might go into a school, and it might be a special school or a mainstream school, and deliver the Reading Doctor intervention. So typically schools will buy into the Reading Doctor service, which includes all the resources. So the reading books, all the branded materials. So I've created hundreds of our own branded resources. So that will either be left out in the school for the Reading Doctor just to turn up with their handbag and just start teaching, or they might have like a pop-up where they just see a few children in a school. Typically, they'll work with children who've had years, and I mean years, sometimes 12-year-olds who've had 8 years of phonics only intervention. And so it hasn't worked for them. So then it's repeated again, and then it hasn't worked, so it's repeated again. And it's that old, doing the same thing, expecting a different outcome. So that Reading Doctor will work one-to-one. We never compromise on that, because we often work with children who psychologically have been really put off reading and their self-esteem is rock bottom. So they'll work maybe all day in a school, if the school has bought into the Reading Doctor for the whole day, or maybe just a morning. A lot of Reading Doctors are there till sort of 2:30, so they can leave and go and pick their own children up from school, because that's a big driver. I think teachers particularly feel so guilty that they are teaching, and I felt this, I remember feeling it, but not being able to pick your own children up from school when all the other parents are there to pick their children up. So that's one thing. And then they might get home and somebody else is there to look after their children, or their own children might stay on the after school clubs, and then the Reading Doctor will get home and then teach some private pupils in their reading room. And their reading room is a room that is completely fully equipped. That I go to a Reading Doctor's home and set up with them. I personally visit there, spend the day with them, set everything out. And when I walk out, they're ready to start teaching. They might have 2 or 3 pupils, depending on how many they want for that evening. And then in the evening, well, once a month on a Monday, we have a monthly meeting. So if it's a Monday, first Monday of the month, they'd be joining that. If they're not working in a school during the daytime, they might access some of the online courses that we have available to them, so they can get themselves, more sort of qualified in different areas. So there's lots, or they might go to a yoga class at 11 o'clock that they really always wanted to go to. We've got one franchisee, one of her motives was she wanted to be able to ride her horse more. So whatever works for them. So it's not like they're restricted, like you must run a class at this time to this time. It totally is up to them how much they want to work or how little.
That's fantastic. I picked up on a few things that you said there that I really loved. One of the things that you said there, that you discovered somebody's why or their passion was they wanted to spend more time riding their horse. And another person might be they miss the after school football games or the activities, or they just want to spend have a little bit more of a flexible day. And clearly flexibility is something that you really promote so that this works, for all sorts of different types of people. And another thing that I picked up on there is, you spoke a little bit about the fact that sometimes young people have been in school and unfortunately the system hasn't worked, and that you mentioned there about primary school, and it resonated with me a little bit.
Right.
We all fondly think of primary school, or more often than not, when people think back to their schooling, primary school was something that they enjoyed a lot more. And there is this creativity and feeling of fun there, and that is sometimes lost. The other thing that we picked up on is, you said that sometimes you help people that have perhaps been excluded. Perhaps part of the reason for that frustration in a young person is because they feel like they can't get on, and then they're not getting on with the learning styles, and therefore it's perhaps a little bit of rebelling against that. So wonderful to have something that can hopefully take people back in a positive way, because you've also said there, which I thought was really, really interesting and wonderful to hear, teachers are full of passion. Everybody remembers a good teacher. A good teacher can genuinely change children's lives, and
just one. It can just be just the one.
Definitely. And myself, I'm pretty certain that the exams that I did well in were just because of the teacher I had. It was the same teacher for the few that I managed to pass. And I remember him so clearly.
So you think back, did that one teacher give you one-to-one time? Did they talk to you? Did they listen to you?
Yes, they did. They did listen. They did listen, and they just had a beautiful style about things, just something that matched with me. So that's why it resonated when you said about learning styles. Very quickly before
what you were saying about a child, like they may show those behaviours because they're frustrated. For some children, it's off the scale, and they can explain it. They can say, I was asked to read this big, thick book, so I jumped on the table, I kicked the chair over, and I ran out the school gate. Or I locked myself in the toilet, or every time it was my turn to read, I pretended I need to go to the toilet. So when we first meet a pupil, we always have that conversation, and we have this 10 steps to success, which we get the child to place themselves on, which starts from I won't read. And it goes up to I can read anything. And during their reading doctor intervention time, they choose when they move themselves up. So it is causing so many negative behaviours, if you like, in schools. But actually, it's just their way of communicating and saying, I can't access this. It's too hard. You're not presenting it in a way that works for me. So we're very multisensory, totally bespoke. So if we've got a 14-year-old who's into motocross, we will present that child with a book about motocross with characters that are their age, because the biggest problem is that older children are being presented with, and in their words, babyish books. And that just compounds that negativity for them, that they're stupid, silly, all of those kind of things. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. You know, I couldn't agree with you more there. Just very quickly, if you have just joined us today, this is Franchising Brand Stories, and today we're hearing the brand story behind the Reading Doctor, and it's a fantastic story. So, if you have just joined us and you would like to catch the replay, if you scan the QR code that's on the screen right now, then you can watch right from the beginning. Let's have another look here, because we've got lots of lovely comments coming in, and it's fantastic that people have taken their time to join us this evening. So let's have a quick look at what Tim's got to say. It struck me when I first met Deborah that while creating a franchise which helps students read, she is doing something which is fundamentally awesome. Agree with that. There are many, many thousands of people who struggle with reading, which holds them back in every aspect of their lives. Being able to read well helps students in every single subject at school and further education. Deborah is creating something which really does change the lives of many, many people. I agree. I really agree. You know, it must be really wonderful to genuinely be part of something that is taking that passion that teachers have and really trying to cut through some of that red tape that doesn't allow you to deliver on that passion, perhaps. You know, you'll be able to present it in a much more flexible way, focused on those children. And like you say, if you change just one life, that's a very important thing to have done.
Absolutely. And just seeing Tim's name pop up there, I must mention that Tim has been pivotal in this whole the whole franchising journey. So as a self-employed tutor, as I was when I first started, I was a member. I signed up. I thought, what would the best tutor be? They'd be insured. They'd have a proper company. They'd have all the best resources. Oh, I wonder if there's an association I could join. And the Tutors Association was not in its infancy, but I think it was maybe, I don't know, 4 years old or something then. And Tim was the president of the Tutors Association then. So as a member of the Tutors Association, I just called the Tutors Association one day, happened to speak to Tim, and then mentioned that I was thinking about expanding, and I'd started to look at licensing and franchising. And then he probably gave me an hour and a half of his time on the phone and just really just gave me an insight into the world of franchising, really, and asked me just a few questions. And it was clear then that franchising was my route and not licensing. So, and he's always been a really big champion of the Reading Doctor as well.
No, that's fantastic. Actually, I mean, we've got a couple of good questions that I want to bring up from Simon in a minute, and you've almost touched on one of these questions actually, which was, why did you choose franchising as a growth model? I mean, you spoke a little bit there about some great advice you got there from the wonderful Tim, but was it something in your mind to grow using franchising as that model?
Well, it goes back to when I was a teacher. I never wanted to be a head teacher. Didn't want to be a head teacher because head teachers, I mean, I know, you know, sorry if there's any head teachers that listen to this in the future. I know they're great, but they'll probably also agree with me. There's not a lot of their job that is to do with teaching. So I didn't want to be a people manager in the kind of like purest sense. I know being a franchisor does mean that, but somebody said to me, you are a leader, but you're a leader that brings people with you. You don't do top down. And so when I started to look at how I could expand, I knew I didn't want to start a tuition company because, and I know there's a lot of money in tuition companies, but I knew that that's what I didn't want, because I didn't want to be I didn't want to just be all about the money and driving and numbers and getting as many children in one class as possible to make as much money. I knew that I wouldn't fit, and there is a market for that, but I knew that wasn't for me. So what I knew I needed was to get like-minded people who were as passionate as me about teaching children to read. And I knew I had to create this ready to go sort of system and resources, because I knew one of the pain points for teachers is the hours you spend in preparation. So for the Reading Doctor franchise, you don't have to do any preparation. Everything is just there, ready for you to go. The pupil has their own little Reading Doctor messenger bag, which is beautifully embroidered with our logo, which costs like 10 times the price of a normal book bag. And they have all their own resources in it. They take it away, they bring it back, and then the Reading Doctor gets it out and they start teaching them. And because we have a session sequence, we have a way of teaching, but it's not prescribed. Reading Doctors are really intuitive and minute by minute observing what the child's doing and knowing what that child needs next. So all that, those planning, lesson plans, all of that is gone. So
I love that. Yeah, I love what you were saying there, because it's actually conveniently answered the question that Simon's asked here. And Simon's put, I'm sure you have many teachers looking to join, but what personal qualities and attributes do you look for? You've sort of answered that, which I love the answer. You said you were looking for like-minded. You said intuitive. And I really like that intuitive part, you know, because if you can spend time with a child, listening, watching, you know, their body language, seeing what they respond to well, rather than spending that time writing a plan that's perhaps a little bit more generic. So using intuition and gut feel and reading people, is that pretty important?
Yeah, passion, sense of humour, somebody who likes to be part of a community. So I can't even begin to explain what an amazing community we've created at the Reading Doctor. So we've got, you know, my franchisees, I encourage them to get involved. So if they've got a particular qualification, so we've got somebody who can diagnose dyslexia, so she delivers the dyslexia training. We've got other people who've got specialisms in other areas, so they deliver the training to the new franchisees if they've got a specialism. So they make connections straight away with other franchisees. When they come on board, I always say, speak to another franchisee, and I try and connect somebody who's got something in common. So like if they've just come off maternity leave, then I'll hook them up with another franchisee who's already established and came off maternity leave. So they don't have a script. I don't tell them what they can say, what they can't say. It's totally transparent. So if that person listening to the genuine feelings of that franchisee doesn't like it, they're not right for our community.
No, that's fantastic.
One Reading Doctor described it as she's found her tribe. They go over to each other's houses, some of them. Three of my franchisees sent me a photograph of them all in the hot tub. I was a bit jealous.
Oh, that's amazing. That's fantastic. You've just said there, found her tribe. Yeah. What a thing to say, you know, if you've got that support around you with other franchisees, and the hot tub sounds delightful as well. Wow, what a way to get together, you know, drinks in a hot tub.
Lunches, they meet for coffees,
fantastic.
And it's just, and they will put a photo, I don't know about this a lot of the time. The first I know of it, they put a photograph on our sort of community shared platform that they've spent the day together, and it's
fantastic. A couple more questions that I want to ask. We always ask about life-changing stories, not just for franchisees, but for students, for people, you know, where what you're doing is clearly something that changes lives probably more than any other franchise I can name, because it's such a fundamental key to not just a young person, but certainly to a young person as they start to get older and opening up all sorts of different opportunities. Are there any stories that stick out in your mind across the years of you know, somebody's life having been changed by this, or, you know, a student that's learned to read and how they celebrated that?
There really are, so I'm not just saying this, so many, and we've create case studies all the time of this, but I'm just going to choose one, and that is one of my pupils that I've taught one-to-one. So when he was in year 2, his mum brought him to me for reading doctor sessions and said he is really struggling with learning to read. He's refusing to write. So we are reading doctors, but we do include some writing as well and spelling. So I started working with him when he was in year 2. And so remember that 5.9 to 6.3 age where the self-esteem is damaged? He'd just tipped over that 6.3 and his self-esteem was going downhill rapidly. So his mum recognised that it wasn't just about teaching him to read. She knew, she was clever enough to know this was having an impact on every area of his life. So he was refusing to go to swimming lessons, for example. He wouldn't go to anything because he would have had that feeling of fear of failing in everything. Because he was failing in school, he thought whatever he went to, he would also fail. So the first thing I did was, which is standard with us, we create an environment where it's okay to make mistakes, it's okay to take risks, and we celebrate mistakes and actually say, oh, I really like the fact that you realised that that word wasn't quite right, so you went back and changed it, and that meant that it made sense, which means you can enjoy the story. So we did all of that, all the usual stuff with the reading, and his reading was really coming on, and then did a bit of writing with him one day, and he literally got the pencil and snapped it in so hard, held it down on the page, and it actually snapped because he was so cross about having to write. Anyway, some people will say to me, how long is the Reading Doctor intervention? And sometimes when I say, well, some children stay with me for 5 years, they're like, well, I can tell they're thinking, that must be a bit of a rubbish intervention then if they're with you for 5 years. But remember, some of the children we're working with their self-esteem is damaged. They've got dyslexia, they may have ADHD, autism, they have potential barriers to learning to read. So with this particular boy, his reading was going up and up and up, got to the top level. And I sort of said to his mum, he can have a standard tutor now. He doesn't need me anymore. And she was like, he's built such a good relationship with you that I need him to stay with you. And can you focus more on the writing, which I did. And anyway, he stayed with me till he was in year 7. But in year 6, by the time he got to year 6, because loads happened in between, by the time he got to year 6, he had started to go to piano lessons. He was passing grade after grade after grade. He went to gymnastics club. He got promoted straight into the squad. In year 6, he got a scholarship. It's to a state school, but a scholarship so that all of his music lessons were funded. And he was, he's just flying. And then his mum, he did eventually leave me, and his mum still would send me little films that he's in because he really got into drama and he was smashing it, getting lead parts, So, we're not just about teaching these children to read. We're giving them their self-esteem back. We're allowing them to access other things in life that they feel like they can't do because their self-esteem has been so damaged.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's just one.
Yeah, I mean, what a wonderful story there. I mean, a good teacher changes a life, and it's so true. I mean, that self-esteem, that confidence that comes with not struggling in the department of reading is truly life-changing. And thank you for sharing that with us. Gosh, I could talk to you for hours. It's been such a fascinating story. We are starting to get towards the end, and we need another session of this. We really do. So maybe you have to come back for a part 2. But I am going to quickly take a couple more. More about the mechanics of this. Simon's put, do franchisees operate in their own exclusive territories? That's a good question. Is that how it is separated out?
So they have their reading room in their home, and then their territory is about a 20-minute drive time. So where a parent might come from to take their pupil, their child, to a reading doctor. So it's a 20-minute drive time. Schools are not in territories because a reading doctor could just be like fully booked if they had 2 schools, and some franchisees might be prepared to travel to a school that they know that's an hour away, whereas others might not even want to be in schools. And because they can't employ, so it's a lifestyle franchise, they can't employ other reading doctors, then yeah, that's how it works. So they have a territory for their private pupils. But what we found, we made the classic mistake when we first franchised, and you know what I'm going to say, too big a territory. And very quickly, we've got other reading doctors in their area. So they've reduced their territory because they're fully booked. So we've had examples of a teacher taking their child to a reading doctor and then them deciding that to become a reading doctor just because they've seen it from the parents' perspective. We teach many teachers' children. Does that make sense? Did I say that?
It does to me. It does to me. So
yeah. So yes, it is an exclusive territory, but our reading doctors are very caring and sharing. And if one's fully booked, they will pass them on to the nearest one, and that just depends whether the parent's prepared to travel that little bit further.
Yeah.
We need more reading doctors. We cannot fulfill demand.
Well, that's fantastic.
Unfortunately, it's fantastic, but it's not in a way because there is.
Well, that's true. That's true. But at least you know the challenge is being identified and addressed in a really good way. And yes, it would be good if it wasn't needed, but it is needed, and therefore embrace the fact that it's needed. Help as many people as you can, as many young people, because I can see how much it's changing lives. Look, if you have just joined us today, this is Franchising Brand Stories, and we are hearing what's under the hat of the reading doctor today with the lovely Deborah Salsbury. We are coming to an end. But if you would like to catch the replay, you'll be able to find this on LinkedIn and on YouTube, so please do that. But we are going to finish now with chapter 3. And chapter 3 is where we get our franchising brand stories exclusive. And what we're going to ask you now is all about the future. So what plans have you got for the reading doctor in the future, and where are things going to go?
It's really interesting you've asked me that question, because one of my entrepreneurial pupils in one of my special schools, so a child who's been excluded, said, so how many reading doctors do you think you're going to have by the end of the year? So he actually asked me that question. He went, 100? I said, well, that's a bit optimistic. We've got 34 now. And then I explained the quality over quantity thing to him.
Sounds like he could be a franchisee.
Oh, he could be amazing. He's told me I need to sponsor football clubs. Oh, he has got the best business brain ever.
Fantastic. Watch out for him.
Yes. Oh, well, you do know so many entrepreneurs, and I think franchisors are dyslexic.
Yeah. You think you could be.
So I think, and ADHD, which is why I've just gone off on that tangent and not actually answered your question. So I keep looking at that question that's up there now.
It's okay. Well, look, this is we're talking about what's going to happen in the future. So perhaps this could happen.
Well, I have had interest internationally. I'm a bit apprehensive about it for many reasons, and I've talked to a lot of people in the franchise sector, and there's a lot of alarm bells, and I think I need to maximise the potential in the UK first. We do teach to some children who live in other countries online, because we have got an online offering as well, mainly face-to-face, but we do online. So the mission is to reach out to as many struggling readers as possible. So if I'm going to fulfill that, then I do need to think internationally. I've just got a few more little things I want to perfect in terms of all the resources, nearly there. And then I could think about it. It's that scary thing of, like, you know, losing control, the brand being misused, and the impact that may have on my reading doctors here, who obviously are very, very important to me.
Of course, no, it's a great answer to that, and it's lovely to hear how you want to make sure you protect things. And you know, it's tempting to want to expand things perhaps too quickly internationally. But it's great to hear how supportive you are, and you know, I wish you all the success continuing to grow the brand and helping as many young people as you can. I think it's wonderful. I've put up a QR code on the screen right now. Now that QR code takes you to the Reading Doctor website. So while we finish up today, or if you're watching this in the distant future, spooky, please scan that QR code, and that's going to take you right to the place where you can find some information. Quickly before I round up, Deborah, is that a couple of things. Best way to get in contact with you, and any final thoughts you'd like to leave with people that have watched this today.
So if you're a potential franchisee, you can go to our website and you can download the franchise program, the franchisee program, we call it, with all the information. If you're a school leader who would like the Reading Doctor into your school, or a parent, then the website really. If you would just like to connect with me on LinkedIn, or scan the QR code. That was impressive how you pointed exactly to where it was. Yeah, LinkedIn's good. LinkedIn, message. Yeah.
Great. No, that's perfect. Well, look, you've got lots of lovely ways to get hold of Deborah and to find out even more about the franchise. So please do that. Okay, so I'd first of all like to thank everyone who's taken their time to be with us today. It's been a really inspirational story to hear for me. So I'd really like to thank you, Deborah, for taking your time to tell your story, because it's a truly inspirational one, and I really do wish you the best, because I think it's going to help a lot of youngsters, and I'm a big fan of that, as everybody should be. So
thank you for taking me out of my comfort zone.
Well, you are brilliant anyway. So next week on the Franchise Show, we are talking to Gary Chatwin, and we're going to be discussing franchise funding, which is an important topic to talk about. So join us for that on Tuesday, 2nd of July, 5:15 GMT, 12:15 EST. And join us next week for Franchising Brand Stories, where we get to hear, love doing this, what's under the hat of the bike fitters. So look forward to you joining us then, 5:15 next Thursday, where we hope to hear another fantastic story. So again, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. Have a wonderful week ahead, and take good care. Cheerio.